So with that being said, let's jump into the Culture Corner segment, which let's just start out this by saying we understand this is a sensitive topic. It ain't us. We didn't make the movie. We're not trying to force this on society. We're actually calling it out to be as disgusting as it is. David might crack some jokes here or there, but please don't cancel us, cancel warriors.
Up here. Keep it classy.
Yeah. Hopefully classier than the people who thought making this movie was a good idea.
So, Dane, what is the title of this movie, by the way?
This actually comes from an article. I realized after the fact that this is a little bit older story than current events, but it still really hits home on this general idea of trying to desensitize society to extremely disgusting ideas because, listen, you don't have to be a right-wing conservative, moral authority on everything to find some things so absolutely disgusting and objectionable that they probably shouldn't be allowed in polite society, yet the powers that be think otherwise.
You don't have to walk into a pizza shop with an AK. That's all we're saying. Please don't, actually.
That's true, but you can still object to the direction that some of these people are pushing. So,
correct.
This article is actually from pre-COVID times, just barely. It's from February of 2020. What a better time, February of 2020.
Well, it was pre-COVID for us, but the rest of the world was experiencing.
That's true. So anyway, as David alluded to in the pre-show, this film is a sci-fi film called, quote, it's just, quote, Trouble with Being Born. And this was a film put on at a Berlin Film Festival in 2020. And the plot of the film is that a childlike android played by Lena Watson, a real live 10-year-old child, has a definitely heavily suggestive sexual relationship with an adult male. Now, the article is very clear to point out that all of the implied sex scenes in the movie are actually a CGI, so they didn't subject this young girl to actually carrying out some of these uncomfortable scenes, I guess for whatever...
Uncomfortable.
For whatever that's worth in terms of them backing away from the edge just a little bit. But the film, which, again, full disclosure, I have not seen... have no desire to see because,
I wonder why.
I'm not a big fan of sharing child pornography. But in the movie, the android, again, played by Lena Watson, refers to this adult male as, quote, daddy. And I'm just going to quote...
Pause. Is there anything more disgusting than, like, a girlfriend calling, like, a boyfriend daddy? Like, in colloquial terms? Like
you're talking about even of adult consensual
if they
relationships.
Were adult consensual, even that, it's like.
Ugh. So we are going to link to this independent article about the movie at wndpodcast.com/117. You'll see it in the description on these videos. But without reading the whole article, I'm just going to read one short paragraph to give you the gist of what the movie is about. And the paragraph says, quote, while most of the sexual abuse is implied rather than explicit. Thanks for that.
Thank you for implying abuse.
Back to the article, quote, according to reports, the film leaves little doubt that the man, played by Dominic Warta, has a sexual relationship with the child robot. The film also contains multiple nude scenes, which were created using CGI, as I stated before, end quote. So here's the problem. I think it's obvious to anybody that's not a complete and utter deviant what is wrong with this situation. It's not simply the fact, although this is also objectionable, it's not simply the fact that you have a movie portraying, at least implicitly, sex scenes between a young female girl and an adult male. That's problematic in and of itself. But what's even more problematic, or probably not more problematic, but equally as problematic, is the context. You know, David and I were talking about this before, and we're like, yeah, okay, well, you know, some movies that are, you know, based on true events that depict, you know, a minor that went through sexual abuse, you know, that's those movies have been made before. And when you think about the context of those movies, which is, hey, look at this terrible thing that happened to this child.
Deplorable.
Isn't that terrible?
Deplorable.
Like, that's the point of the movie.
The person that's eliciting the act is a villain in the movie.
Right. That's the point of the movie. Whereas this movie is to subtly nudge you in the direction of, well, an adult male being attracted to a minor female is, I guess, less gross if it's a supposed android, according to the movie. The attraction to at least something appearing to be a minor child is not gross or terrible or whatever. And maybe this is something that society should explore. No. There are topics that there's no business exploring. There is no business exploring artistically or any other way the attraction of an adult male to an underage child. Sorry, maybe that makes me a terrible, evil, no good, very bad conservative and not very progressive for not wanting to, at least partially sanction pedophilic behavior. But that's just where I stand on it.
Dane, I think if there was a moral between any of the producers or any of the people that run any of the studios in Hollyweird or wherever the hell this happened, I would rather see a colonoscopy shot for an hour and a half than you try to persuade me that, like, maybe, just maybe, he's skirted all of the, like, issues of, like, taking an actual kid with actual feelings. He took what it looks like and he just made it into this thing. It's still sentient. It's still aware of itself, but he can be attracted to it and it's not confined to the morals of a normal human being. So, like, if we can go that bridge, well, then maybe we can go a bridge further and just say that maybe it's not so. In the Bible, Mary was 13 when she had Jesus. When she married Joseph, she was sexually viable. She was a full-grown woman. That's the subtle slope down to just depravity.
I guess the thing that I'll leave it off with, and why this is in the Culture Corner, it might already have occurred to you why we put this in the Culture Corner, because you might remember a couple years ago there was a rather famous in terms of the outrage that it generated, and deservedly so. I believe it was a woman who studies sexual attraction or whatever, and she did a TED Talk where she was essentially arguing in the TED Talk that for the phrase minor attracted persons, which is called MAPS. So we shouldn't call them
flag too, by the way.
So we shouldn't call them pedophiles anymore. We should call them minor attracted persons, and it's just like anybody else's sexual attraction, and it's not terrible, and we shouldn't, kick them out of society and ostracize them for it and all this kind of stuff. And she had this TED Talk, and it generated a lot of outrage. And again, in David and I's opinion, deservedly so. But whether it's that TED Talk or whether this movie or whether you start to see things in media and the news reports and stuff like that, when you see these subtle little nudges trying to either desensitize you or in more, I guess, explicit terms, try to make it sound like it's okay to engage in these types of deviant behaviors. And I'm not going to make the slippery slope argument of if you make one type okay, then it's going to open the floodgates to a bunch of others. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying is there are some bright lines, even as subjective as morality can be, there are some bright lines that must not in any circumstances for any reason be crossed. And one of those is doing anything remotely sexual, suggestive or otherwise, to a minor child. And when you see things like this, trying to nudge society or just kind of putting feelers out, like, are people going to get mad if we do this? Oh, okay. Well, okay, they got mad, so let's back it off a little bit. We'll try again in a couple of years. And subtly trying to push this deviant behavior as normal or acceptable or something that should be anything other than treated with mental psychiatric help. your flag should already be way up. And I know for the self-selected group of people that follow and listen and watch Weapons of Meme Destruction, you're already probably agreeing with us that this is highly, highly messed up. But there's a lot of people for which they would sit down and watch this movie and be like, that's an interesting way of conceptualizing the topic artistically. And I really think they had a point with X, Y. No, they didn't. And no, this is not acceptable. And no, under any circumstances, should this move any further forward in terms of being normalized in society.
Well, listening to you, Dane, it sounds as though this should have been, if that makes sense, the Epstein portion. Because why would anybody be concerned with dulling the narrative around pedophilia when only moments ago there was a guy that had all the world leaders fucking children on his island? Maybe if some of them were CGI, this would be less egregious. Maybe if we saw it more often, we'd be numb to it. Maybe it wouldn't be such a taboo thing if we made it part of nomenclature. That, again, a society that has no standards has no foundation, and a society that has no foundation will crumble instantly. That you saw it happen with Rome. Every great empire that's ever existed has always crumbled because it let its foundation go.
In most cases, historically speaking, the deviance preceded the crumble. The society decayed in terms of becoming unmoored from any sort of objective morality, to the extent that morality can be objective. Again, I concede and understand that it is subjective in very many regards. But there should be an objective morality when it comes to how we treat children, the most vulnerable members of our society. And to David's point, all throughout history, it's Rome, it's the Weimar Republic before Nazi Germany came to power. It's all throughout history. It happened again and again and again. The society became completely untethered from any sort of morality and just became deviant beyond repair, to the point that, the collapse happened. And oftentimes what stepped into the void of that collapse were tyrants, were people, strong men that were going to bring everything back. And they used things like this to argue for why they should have that power. So to any of our progressive friends that think we're being backward and terrible and no good, very bad people because we don't want to engage in this discussion or this topic on this in the way that this movie suggests that it should be done, you're always worried about the rise of a Hitlerian character. Well, if you picked up a history book, you would realize that this type of stuff is what always leads to that. History doesn't always repeat itself, but it very often rhymes.
Another thing that we say on this podcast nearly constantly.